Ears are ringing.
No, he comes back in season 2. The bad. Oh no,
Miyagi.
I thought you were talking about the bad guy.
No.
Is it live?
Yeah, he's dead. Yeah.
Because that's going to be freaky. I don't want to see him.
Are we good?
We're kicking, yeah. Guys, welcome to a grainy HotBox show. Tonight you're joined by myself, Buzz, Charles. Yes, it's so many names to remember now. Joe, Ash, Dan, and as always we're going to be speaking Lang Dank, hey?
It's like you only ever see us on your show, right?
Pretty much.
What's your name? You haven't been here for 3 months.
Yes, dude. I blame it on the weed. Short and long-term memory. So guys, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Before we get into the news and things like that, guys, we're going to be cutting live. We're going to try and do something clever and techie. And about 50 minutes into the show, we're going to go to... What's that thing called, Nelio?
Beyond Psychedelics.
Beyond Psychedelics in Prague.
Prague.
And Myrtle's doing a talk there. So we're going to see if we get it to work and it'll go live to her and we'll hang out and chat with you wherever we can.
Strawberry fields forever. Lucy in the sky with diamonds.
Fields of green forever.
Yeah,
Fields of green forever.
So before we get into the news, we got some toys to play with this week.
Oh, sweet.
I think let's start with the most gimmicky thing.
Stoner Lego, yeah?
We got generously donated. We saw these on Facebook. They trended a while ago. It's like this silicone ring that you put on your finger, apparently.
It's not a sex toy.
Yes, it's the most disappointing sex toy ever. It's like, for micro penises. And you're supposed to slip your joint in and be able to jam your jams while keeping the joint handy. I don't see an ashtray attached, but I don't know. I think we need to put this thing to the test if it's a gimmick or not. So I think someone needs to roll a joint, and between Dan and you,
I think we put this thing
smoke
to
the whole
test.
joint with the controller in your hands to see if it's
See if it's legit. See if it works. Okay, let's have a look at this thing. Hey, well,
and it goes with all consoles, with Xbox and PlayStation.
It works through all consoles.
Compatible.
Multi-console compatible. Universal. You know what?
The joint halfway.
You can even use it while you're driving.
Oh. No, I think you actually need to roll a fresh joint. Come on.
Now you see both hands on the steering wheel while you're driving and you're smoking. There we go.
You know what? You need one on each finger, motherfucker.
Yes.
Edward CBD hand.
Isn't it dangerous to smoke weed and drive?
No.
I don't know. I'm conflicted there. I know it's nice, but I don't know if it's dangerous or not. I know there's reports that have said no.
yeah, I don't know.
I battle to see how it could be dangerous because I tend to not drive over the speed limit because I am paranoid because around the corner could potentially be a whole bunch of cops waiting to just so I drive nicely.
Nicely.
Within the laws and everything.
Because there's that saying, I thought about it a couple of days ago. How does it go? Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?
Yeah.
Smoke and Uber.
Well, precisely.
Smoke and Uber.
Precisely.
Well, if you can smoke in the Uber, that's even better. But you only find those here and there.
Maybe one day, dude, they make you sit on the back of the bakkie with your bong.
No, you just got to find the right green Uber. That's fine.
Yeah.
Find the Uber that comes in a green car. Then it's a green friendly Uber.
That's what I'm saying, Duber, dude.
You know how much money you make? If you were a green friendly Uber that was particularly known, like you could put your advert out there and say, I'm green friendly, live. You know how much business you'll get?
Straight.
Bongs in the cup.
And remember, it's your
Straight.
choice. If you can say if they can smoke in the car if you don't mind them smoking in the car.
Exactly.
If you just say to them, well, look,
Yeah,
this is the disclaimer.
There's a problem in the States because there are places where you can't smoke anywhere, but weed's legal. There's dispensaries and everything, but you can't smoke it in your hotel. You can't smoke it in public. There's nowhere to smoke. So they've even got these party buses in some states where you go onto this bus and you can at least smoke on the bus. The bus is like a traveling.
Yeah, but let's be. I mean, with the Uber local, you'll be like very discreet. You'll be like, I'm a green.
We're getting way behind on our smoking because it ain't hot in here at the moment, folks.
There is nothing
So I think our next gadget of the week, we got. I don't know what's the correct term for this. Dan, I refer to this as a honey bucket.
Yeah, it's a honey bucket.
And it's basically a tie jobby that's fitted on either like a quartz or glass dome. So I think one of you oaks are gonna have to put this to a test drive. Back in the day when I used to dab, I hit this thing. And I thought it was like too high flow. You really had to commit.
Yeah.
Otherwise the dab ran away. But
So
I
what
think
did you say you used to dab? Did you stop dabbing?
Yeah, dude.
Back in Nam.
You gave it.
Back in war veteran over here.
Yeah. Jackie's got the beard and everything. He came out of war and he's like, no more.
Watch out, watch out.
You gotta do that PTSD. So you guys gonna hit this quick and see if it's legit or not.
Yeah,
like, Dan,
it does
you
look
keep saying
like...
you rate it. I'm not so sure.
It does look like you gotta really hit that thing hard before you
show
get
me how
anything.
it's working.
I think Dan will show you how quick. Dan,
So
I'll
you
roll
heat it
myself
up like
in.
that,
No,
so
it's
you
simple.
don't hit the
Simple.
glass, and then you take the lighter and you push it that way.
And you push
Before
it
you
there
do
though. You don't touch it
You
near
heat
there.
the base of this thing. Dish.
I think you guys
Or
are
just
just
like
gonna
a
have to do one quick
Mm.
and see for
It's
yourselves.
like straight there.
Yeah,
Yep.
gas it,
That's
dude.
it.
Load up your dad
Load up
first.
your dab first. Which
Yeah,
one do you
man.
want?
So
That
much
lighter doesn't
dads.
work.
This one.
It will.
Swing a raw then.
Let's do this one.
Sure.
There.
Make it nice and red on the bottom, and then you got time to pick your dab and swing it in, and then you can enjoy the wonderful effects of cannabis
And
sativa.
touch it there, dude. Not near the bucket. Eh?
So you don't touch it on that bit that you heated up.
Yeah, you must hold it where you heated it up, and then you can push it down with your thumb, and it makes it nice. And
Then you're stoned and your fingers hurt.
And then you
yeah,
touch
you
your
lose
eyeball.
you lose
as
your
the
fingerprints, and you become anonymous.
Oh, okay.
It's the whole game.
clutch. It's the modern
So when must I
smiley.
stop doing this?
Now.
Whenever you're ready.
When it's ready.
Now you turn it here.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Hot damn!
that's sehr schön.
It looks like
Oh.
it worked.
It worked,
Eh?
yeah.
Yeah,
Wanna try it?
nice.
Good work.
I'll
Am
try
I
that
supposed to
now.
cough?
Just wanna...
No, that's good. I cough. It's my gig. I cough.
It's the hand sponge line. So guys, while we're trying this all out, it was big news this week. Canada apparently legalized recreational weed. So
Well, it's
like-
still
yeah, so what happened is there was a bill that went to the Senate and it got passed unanimously-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying they've got 2 to 3 months to now pass.
They have to
What?
To
finalize
get the
paperwork.
regulations in
They
place.
literally
Fine,
just have to make the
Regulations for
paperwork.
packaging. So,
Exactly, yes.
So it can say this is weed
Exactly.
in the shop on the
They've
shelf.
said yes. They just have to finalize all the fine print and
Like
then
where
iron
you're
out the
allowed to
creases.
smoke it, what can you walk
no
down
what
the street
packaging it
and
comes
smoke
in
it?
and
Or what?
what the
What about like
Yeah, you
where
can
you're
have
allowed
30
to smoke
grams
it?
on you
There we
in
go.
public.
oh wait
You can
actually
have 4 plants at home.
Is that
I got-
all?
I got
I got
the
it
details.
all legit
Yeah,
already.
the legal age is 23, which a lot of I think it's 23. A lot
23.
of people don't agree with that because
I got it here.
the drinking age
I
is
got it
18.
there too, dude.
Which one? Let's see it.
Oh,
What, the
first
story?
fail.
Oh no, this story. I got the legalized
happened?
the actual
First fail on
The
this
McGaffer
product.
didn't work.
the legalities.
Are you
This
wrong?
thing
It was
sucks.
very thin.
No, okay. That's not thin. Like that's a pinner. It's a decent joint. I mean,
It's
that's
not an
not
adjustable
Thin. But this thing
grip.
here is for someone rolling something super fat. I mean, like
That.
Is this not also
who's
a
gonna
joint?
who's gonna smoke that? It's for.
It's a fake joint.
So I've got
A
the
fake
regular
joint.
the Canadian.
okay, chill.
Hang on, Oaks.
A prop.
We can't hear anything. You're having too much fun. Dan, what you trying to
Okay.
say?
I've got here the Canadian laws that they put in
Okay.
place for the offences and whatnot. And here they're saying it's Cannabis Act offence. So offence, public possession of equivalent of more than 30 grams of dried cannabis. The penalty is indictable offence up to 5 years imprisonment or
Yeah,
summary
way too harsh. The
summary conviction
punishments.
offence up to 6 months imprisonment plus fine up to $5,000 or a ticket for $200 plus victim surcharge if greater than 50 grams and greater than 7 plants involved.
so they
Is
clearly
that
want you to
legal?
only smoke government weed
Basically.
Okay.
I don't know about that, but it's
unless
just
you
like
smoke your 4 plants at home.
Unauthorized promotion, false promotion, prohibited publication, public inducements, packaging, labeling, display, sale of cannabis accessory, young person. They've got all the.
It doesn't
different
leave
laws
much space for craft cannabis. You can't have like 20 plants and maybe sell to 5 of your friends.
here. I don't think
Doesn't
so.
look like they're
Distribution
gonna
of
like it.
budding
Maybe that
flowers,
is what it's
cannabis,
gonna be.
unauthorized.
I don't know.
Yeah, distribution of budding flowering cannabis plants, unauthorized import export, possession for purposes of unauthorized import export, unauthorized extraction and with use of organic solvent, unauthorized cultivation from existing cannabis. That's indictable offence up to 14 years imprisonment.
Wow.
Summary
Wow.
convicted offence up to 6 months imprisonment plus fine up to $5,000.
I think very soon those punishments will
That's just summary.
maybe become less harsh because they way.
I think
too
that's what they're
harsh.
going to look over.
There's going to be huge outcries about that. There
I think
already
that
is.
they've been fighting with that for the last however
Yeah.
long, you know.
At least they've got the foot in the door, but those punishments are hectic.
Yeah, it is a bit intense. But
Unreal.
yeah, how legal is it really then? But you know, it still
Yeah.
feels kind of like a win.
Mm.
It's more than it was before. I don't know. But it does seem like so severely regulated. And how are you going to enforce so many rules?
It means the black market as it is will probably just stay.
Will flourish, yeah. They're just promoting black market.
Yeah. So what happened? Are we gonna light that? Is that thing
Okay,
gonna
yeah.
fit?
So what we did here. Okay, so the grip is way too large. You can probably get your joint in halfway already.
So it's made for banana boat.
Yeah, exactly. It's made for oak smoking, huge fat.
But I think you're gonna have to light it up because what's gonna happen is we're gonna be cutting over soon to Prague. So I think get it lit. But now the deal is you have to smoke it while holding a controller.
Okay.
For at least the length of a video game. So Super Mario Kart, here we go.
Until it's finished.
Okay, well yeah, let's check it out.
And adjust it to how you feel.
And if you need to smoke while you're playing, you got to make a plan.
Pokemon Go, here we go.
Dan, you got any comments there, dude? Anyone we should say hi to?
I'll tell you now. Let's see what we got here. Hi all. Bradley Morez, how's it going? Martin Latham. Alusha Badenhorst. Warren, what's up?
Thank you for watching every week, Warren.
Yeah, dedicated. We
Yeah,
see you every week, man. And we see a couple of them. Bradley is always there. But yeah, just everyone saying, how's it? Hi. How's it? Hi.
Everybody.
We're just waiting to go live with the DC over in Prague.
Yeah, man.
Prague,
Oh, for the
yeah.
psychedelic thing, eh?
the psychedelic thing. Yeah.
Prague. Jeez, my parents, well, my stepdad and my mother got married in Prague, actually, in one of those massive cathedrals.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but I just saw photos.
Was they weed there, dude? Was they
No, I
weed?
highly doubt it.
Is it, eh?
Fucking hell, no ways.
Is weed legal in Prague? I don't even
No.
know this. No.
Maybe it is, because it's the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
I think, is it Prague? Anyway, we're getting into geography lessons.
Haven't we asked the Dagga Couple? They'll be with us shortly.
We will.
I don't think it's going to be that sort of situation where we'll be able to interact.
Oh,
So
we're
what's-
just going to watch.
No, it's not.
So what's going to
In the Czech
happen?
Republic, it's not.
Not legal. Well, Dan!
We got a computer right here, guys.
You know what we're going to do? Dan's going to be our lesson. What's the
session.
chick's name from Google and from Android? Lexi, please
No, man,
check.
Siri.
Alexa. Siri. Siri, Alexa, and who's the other one? Windows.
Dan.
Dan's the weed Alexa.
Jasper.
We're going to call him Dank.
Yeah,
Dank.
Dang, there we go.
Dank?
Dang.
You need to change your surname so it starts with a K, so you'll be Dan K.
Dan K.
No, dude.
Dan K.
Dan K.
That's just a really cut play on Daddy K.
Yeah.
Wasn't Daddy K the original Dank?
Yeah.
But I think what's going to happen, so guys, for you at home, it's going to go to Myrtle for quite a bit, for like half an hour or so. And we are going to cut back and talk blank tank afterwards as well. We might even extend it a bit if the chatter goes well. But what we are going to do is we're going to try and chat with you in the comments. So chat with us. We're going to chat blank bank. Ask us. Treat it like an AMA as well. Like if you're not feeling the vibe in Prague, ask us things. But I think Myrtle and Jules have really put
The
heart
vibe
and
in
soul
Prague
into
is
this.
psychedelic. It's going to be cool.
Yeah.
Huge.
Because it sounds like it's also full of interesting people. Because it's also this thing, they're going to speak about weed. But what I understand about this
From a
conference, it's
psychedelic
about
point of view.
everything. Hey?
Yeah. Must be so exciting to be there.
Yeah.
Let's cut through earlier. Let's listen to it, can we?
We can actually.
Yeah. Why not? Let's do it.
We can.
I mean, are you guys keen? We can listen to what they're saying.
Yeah, dude, I'm tired of talking about Canada because it just runs dry now.
Bring it in.
Yeah.
So is weed a hallucinogenic? Is cannabis an hallucinogenic?
No.
Let's say
of reference.
European curandero, he's done, he's been working
20 years, there's not that many in Spain, so I can claim that they have more than 20 years experience. And now this person says the opposite. This person says, look, it cost me more than a decade to train to do this. I had to do endless dietas in Peru. I had to travel to Peru. Like all of these things cost money, and they cost a lot of money. I invested a lot of money in training, and I cannot do my work well if I have to be thinking about something else as well as my work. For me to be a good curandero, I need to be 100% committed to it, and I need to be full-time because that's what I need. And I did a lot of training, and I spent many years to get what I am. So I am charging for my ceremony. ceremonies, not just to recoup costs, but actually to make some profit. And I have no issues with this. This is the only way that I can ensure that my work is top level, and it is that I am completely committed, and I'm not doing anything else but this. So here you have, a third point of reference. And then here's another interesting one, also from Brazil. You know, the UDB, the União de Vegetal, is the largest church in Brazil. They have more than 20,000 members. They're not so well known, especially in psychedelic scene, because they're quite discreet and they're not psychedelic people at all. They're actually more like middle class professionals. So they're very, very separated from this sort of like. But anyway, they have, because they're 20,000 members and it's one church, they have a pretty rigorous, like this is the hierarchical structure of how they're organized. I got them from their website. It's pretty complicated. It's a large group of administrative body which is managing a very large group of followers and of churches and a number of properties and a number of things, So I was talking to one of the mestre and I asked them, okay, at which point as you're going up the hierarchy, do you quit your job and you become a full-time, working for the church member? I meant the people that were like sort of the spiritual religious leaders. Not obviously there was a number of staff, secretaries, accountants. All of these people are full-time. But I meant the people that were actually the people that were leading ceremonies, the people that you would call, the bishops or the popes. At which point do they, on the scale, do they stop working and they just take a salary from the church and they become full-time church workers? And he said, never. Now there is a rule about this. You absolutely must keep your job always. If you have a problem because you cannot properly do your job and do your church duties, then you tell the people in the church and they will put somebody else in your place. We have people. But it is a rule that you cannot live off this, right? This will never be your profession. This is and not only that, they have another rule that, in order to make it a sort of like mestre, you have to have a job, and you have to be happy with it, and you have to have a wife, and you have to be happy to marry. Because if you can't keep a job, and you can't keep a relationship, what are you doing teaching other people anything, right? That's their argument. Which, again, it's not, it makes sense, it's a valid, it's sort of, I can see it, it's not exactly, I can see it. It's logical. It's logical, and they're trying to run a large organization. So I'm sure they make all sorts of mistakes before they got to this place. So here we have another point of reference. Here we have another attitude of this, which is like which is the opposite of, as you see, of the European curandero. The European curandero says, no, to do this my job well, I need to be 100% devoted to this. And then in the UDB, they say exactly the opposite. In order to do this well, you need to have a life, and your life needs to work. And then we can talk about what you do in the spiritual field and in the church, what you do, what other commitments do you have beyond this, right? So. Because there's a great tension, and it's unresolved, that we have. Because we have a very clear, established way the market works for goods. I want a pair of shoes, I want a car, I want a chair, I want the table, and here's some money, and then, you give the money back, and we understand, this is the work I did for you, and this is the money that you're paying me, You need the shoes, I made the shoes, now pay me for my work. Now this is transparent, this is completely being accepted by us, we all know how it works. The problem is when we're not talking about goods, when it's no longer a market of goods, but it's a market of relationships. Then the money becomes weird for us and we don't know what to do. So sex, love, money for sex, money for love, money for friendship, money for relationship, money for spirituality, money for healing. Like then we go into a place where it's like, this is not exactly like the shoes. This is not exactly like the shoes, and not only in this is not exactly like the shoes. Like we feel like and this is like a deep. I don't know if it's a hangout or not. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the change of money for sex, for example. I don't know if it's it's difficult, right? It's difficult, and it's big, and it's complex, and it's huge, and it's unresolved. Not just for ayahuasca, but like I said, this is sort of like a societal problem. It's a cultural problem. It's an issue that we have as a culture, you know, with certain extensions of the market logic, you know, to call it somehow. You know, I always you know, when people that don't drink ayahuasca ask me what it is, you know, I always compare it to a mirror. You know, I say like, well, you know, you have a mirror, and you know, you have your face, and you can sort of touch your face all you want, and you can get a sense of what your face is, but you cannot see your face without a sort of technological device that actually lets you see something that is completely yours, and yet you cannot see, right? There is a sort of equivalent for this, but for our insides, no? And in a way, ayahuasca does this. It's sort of a mirror for what's inside of us. You know? It lets us see things that we couldn't see without this technological help. And sometimes, you know, it's not so nice. Just like a real mirror, you know, you look at yourself in the mirror. Now I'm getting old. I'm growing hairs on my ears. You know, it's not exactly flattering. Some of the things that you find when you look in the mirror, you know. Ayahuasca does this, you know. It also shows us, you know, the words and all, but not just of ourselves, but of our culture, you know. And I think this is also part of what happens, you know. It's one of those reflections that ayahuasca gives. This whole issue with money, ceremony, these interchanges. This is one of those like words that ayahuasca like reflects back at us, you know, for us to see. So, you know, because in the work that I'm trying to do, you know, we try to be pragmatic. So we try to be of service of the community. You know, we try to present solutions out of this research that I've been doing. And this is what we're looking. We're looking for models. We're looking for best practices, not prescriptions. So we're not here to tell people what to do as an organization, but to give a service to the community that is useful. See, this is it's a big result. I'm going to share just two ideas which I consider to be very useful best practices around the use of money and ceremony. And I'm going to say that I learned these two. I learned both things from talking to people that run initiation rituals for young people. We're actually a really interesting group of people. I've been learning a lot from them lately. But they have a lot of very similar problematic that you find in the ayahuasca world, except they're, you know, I would say 10 or 15 years ahead of us. So this is what they told me about how they deal exactly with the same issue of, you know, selling ceremony, which is, you know, to say that yes, it's very complicated, it's very complex, it's cultural issue. So, you know, it's very hard to take a stand here or there. There's a lot of stands that are correct. I wouldn't say any of the 4 examples that I've given you are more right than the others. They're all well justified and they're all well argued, you know. So with all of this range of possibility, what can you give as an advice? Well, the first one would be to strive for transparency. Because a lot of the problem around money and ceremony is basically what anthropologists would call gossip, right? So it's like people go to a ceremony and they say like, oh my God, that was like 400 euros for 2 days. There were 20 people here. He made 8,000 euros in 1 week. He's getting rich selling ayahuasca. Well, of course, the truth is, you know, you have to pay for the place, you have to pay for the food, you have to pay the rental of the space, you have to pay like you start to take like all the expenses. It took a week to get all the people there, and then the people helper, and then the drivers, and then this, and then that. When you start to remove all the actual expenses, then the money that ends up in other people's hands, there's a lot less than 8,000 euros left in there in the pot. And when you compound that with the fact that you're not doing it every day or even every week, because it's difficult to get groups of people, whatever, then you see how it begins to dilute much further, right? So this is a magazine that I really like. It was published in the 70s, the Coevolution Quarterly. It's the guys that used to make the Whole Earth catalog. Highly recommendable. It aged so well, but they did something that I always love. This is the last page of every number. The Coevolution Quarterly had no ads. And on the last page of every number, they had their accounting for everybody to see. Everybody who bought the magazine, they could see how much all the staff made, how much all the contributors made, how much they paid for rent, utilities, office supplies, production supplies, all the money, this is how much it costs to make the magazine, this is how much it costs to print it, this is how much the promotion cost, plan, and these are the expenses, and then subscribers, and then like this is the bookstores kept, this is blah, 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 totally minus $14,000 in debt. That's how much money it costs to make that magazine, right? This magazine that you now have in your hands. Now, after seeing this, you're gonna feel very different about subscribing to the magazine, right? This is what I mean about transparency, right? When you become transparent, you know, about how the money goes, what is spent, what is where, a lot of the conflict, a lot of the drama, a lot of the gossip, it becomes instantly deactivated, you know, by this very fact. In fact, you know, a lot of the polemic sort of evaporates, you know, and that's why I think this is a good best practice, because we're not saying things should be here or there. We're saying there's a way underneath to sort of deactivate the polemic itself, you know. And then the other aspect is this, to strive for inclusivity. So the question is not how much the ayahuasca costs. The question is, what about the people that cannot afford to pay that money? That's really the question. Now, if you ask people who work with ayahuasca, you know, should people pay for ayahuasca, shouldn't pay for ayahuasca, this turns into like a giant debate. Like I've seen, like, you know, I've run a number of workshops when this topic comes up. It's very heated and it gets, you know, very, but the thing is, like, that's looking at it the wrong way. That's not the question. The question is not how much it costs or how much it doesn't cost. The question is, how about the people that cannot afford it? Because that's really what we're talking about. That's what money is. That's what it separates. So this is the type of thing that is likely to generate a lot more consensus. So instead of asking, should money even charge for ceremony, we ask, how can we make sure that everybody is included, even people that cannot necessarily afford to do this? Now, everybody's engaged in this discussion, everybody's having ideas, and because really, everybody wants to share it, right? Another thing is how they're gonna make it deal, right? So that's basically it. This is the type of work that we're doing at ICEERS, that I'm doing in particular, right? I am looking for topics, I'm looking for issues, and I'm looking for ways to fit, to match, to make a better fit between the practices around ayahuasca and the society that we live in. And this includes thinking very hard about these types of things before it sort of catches up with us. So like this, you know, this same process I've done for safety, for screening protocols, for, you know, a number of things. And that's it. Thank you very much. This is my email if you want to talk.
Thank you very much. All right, now last up we've got Julian Stubbs and Myrtle Clark to talk about the fight for the right to get high. Specifically, their struggle in South Africa about legalizing cannabis and being directors of South Africa's only cannabis legalization non-profit company.
Thank you very much.
We operate as a team, so we'll just be bouncing the mic. Challenging a century-old law with the right energy and integrity requires that we are conscious of our highness. For those of you who have used entheogens and psychedelics over the last 40 years or so, it is quite possible that you've had a run-in with the law. Every day that we use cannabis and we continue our lifelong relationship with this plant, we risk our liberty.
and charged with possession and dealing in drugs. We had three choices. We could admit our guilt, take the punishment. 7 to 10 years in South Africa for the amount of cannabis that they found. We were charged with 2 kilograms of weed after they had weighed this huge jar of hemp seeds that we had in the kitchen and the glass jar and put it all together. So 7 to 10 years for 2 kilos in South Africa. We could have paid a bribe. South Africa's judicial system is absolutely in tatters. We could have paid maybe €2,500 each, and it would have all gone away in the short term. But we decided to go with the third option, is to fight them and change the law. Sorry. Right now, in every country that is represented in this room now, there are punitive laws for the possession and use of cannabis. The laws that make it illegal for 2 50-something-year-old people with no kids. Whoa. This thing's weird. There you go. 2 people to sit on their couch in the privacy of their own home in their pajamas, watching Netflix, smoking weed. That's my right.
We felt so angry at our experience with the police. It was 5 hours of relentless bullying. We were in our pajamas in our freezing cold kitchen. It was August, which is the middle of winter in South Africa. Julian had a gun to his head. We were just angry, we were frightened, we were stressed out. So we decided to take on the government. We ended up writing a 30-page affidavit charging 7 South African governments with enacting unlawful laws. We explained why we are not criminals and set out what we saw as our inalienable right to, amongst other things, be in our pajamas, sit on the couch in a sanctuary of our own, watching movies, smoking homegrown weed. To our amazement, some months later, an old school, well-respected High Court judge agreed with us. And he put all of our charges on hold, pending the outcome of our challenge to the government. That was in 2011. We had set our first precedent in South African law, a stay of prosecution for a cannabis offense. That's what it's called, stay the prosecution. To this day, we're still out on 1,000 rands bail each. That's about 80 euros. So one day we're going to go back and get our 1,000 rand back. Since then, we've been on a roller coaster ride. It's been an incredible learning curve. Litigation, drug policy, social activism. And this was all because of this challenge to the Constitution of South Africa.
There's no doubt in our minds that the combined 75 years of cannabis use between us, can you believe that? 75 years between us we've been using weed. And the myriad effects the plants had on our lives up to date, that spurred us on our journey to fight the government. When news of our charges that we'd been put on hold got into the South African media, we were enjoying careers in the South African television and film industry. And as we drove to work one day, about a year after we were arrested, we saw a poster on a lamppost. Couple fight for Dagga. Dagga is the colloquial word for cannabis in South Africa. We envisaged 2 people in their home fighting over a joint or a bong or something. And we went to work. But by mid-morning, we realized we were on the front page of a South African daily newspaper. And what the article said was, there were 2 people, 2 private, middle-aged people, fighting for the right to use cannabis in their own home. And it was us. So why would a comfortable, private, middle-aged career couple risk everything they had to sue their government for the right to use weed?
Well, there were a few answers to this question. But the most important answer is that we really like to get high. Just like the estimated 181.8, I don't know how they came up with this number, but 181.8 million other humans on this planet, we responded well to this feeling that we got from the cannabis plant. Another reason was this really bizarre nature of the laws. The way that the laws work, the technicalities of it, none of it really made sense. And here's an example. There was a point at the start of our journey where we were standing in a badly lit corridor of our local magistrates' court. This was a building that was constructed when apartheid was in full swing, as you can notice. The glories of brutalist apartheid architecture. After discussions between our legal team and the public prosecutor, the state decided to drop the dealing charge. There was no evidence of dealing because you have to have cash and weed in the same place, or they've got to catch you on camera or something like that. So they had no evidence of dealing, so they dropped it. But there's a clause in the South African government, in the South African law, that says that if you are caught with more than 115 grams of cannabis, then you're a dealer. And remember, we were caught with 2 kilograms. This clause was really written there to instill fear, raising the stakes, making the bail more expensive, and basically making you hire a more expensive lawyer. So none of this was really rational. They had no evidence of dealing, but according to the law we were dealing, so they just dropped the charge. Now the law is meant to be rational, and there was nothing rational about this.
Whoa. So at that point, with a simple possession charge, we could have walked away with a small fine, not the jail that we expected to get, 7 to 10 years. All we had to do was admit our guilt and pay the money, and then accept a criminal record, which is anything up to 10 years suspended in South Africa for a cannabis charge. No visas, no jobs, no anything with a suspended sentence for weed in South Africa. And that is a very good reason to fight. So at that point, we looked each other in the eye and we knew we owed that moment to this plant. This plant, like all the other teacher plants that we've ever encountered in our lives, that made us what we are, put us on the journey that we're on and helped us co-create the lives we've built by basically locking all the latent creativity she and I have that spurred us on in the industry that we were working in. So from there to now has been a huge adjustment. So has been thrust into the limelight of South Africa's media. The same media that dubbed us the Dagga Couple, for better or for worse. But at that point, our social activism campaign had begun.
The Dagga Couple. There are hundreds of thousands of South Africans who don't respond well to the word Dagga. Just listen to it, Dagga. Like its racially charged cousin marijuana, the ancient Khoisan word Dagga has been vilified in modern times with the sole aim of stigmatizing its users. Dagga doesn't even describe cannabis. Specifically, it describes a feeling. So actually, the critics are way off the mark with their dislike of this ancient, proudly South African word. We get messages from the public expressing their disgust at the use of the word Dagga to describe the healing herb of the nation. It's mostly people who weren't even around in the 70s and the 80s when apartheid was in full swing in South Africa. They have no idea why they hate the word so much. It's just undesirable. The negativity of the word is really ingrained in our society. We use it because it's emotive, and it elicits all manner of reaction within a group, from embarrassment to the usual nervous laughter that always goes around when people are talking about drugs. The marijuana couple or the cannabis couple just doesn't have the same ring to it.
Undesirable. It's a word that describes all the parts of the plants, from the roots to the seeds, and it's entrenched in the 1992 law that we're challenging, the law that upholds the war on the South African cannabis user. We are those undesirable individuals who want to get high or medicate or both. Undesirable to who? And how did they figure it out? What word could they possibly use? Who thought of this? It's not based in science. It's a cut and paste from the 1950s, and it's embedded in the 1961 conventions that we're all fighting just by being here in this tent today. Apartheid left brutal scars in the psyche of our country, one being the propaganda machine that drove the criminalization of Dagga and other drugs, but especially Dagga. After an estimated 600 years of endemic use in southern Africa, with a long heritage of peaceful coexistence as a medicine and a social intoxicant, with many, many dialectic names, the colonial masters of the past designed the prohibition monster and its propaganda to control their indigent labor force. In South Africa, the British colonials banned their Hindu slaves from using their holy sacrament, bang. And interestingly, in all the other 10 South African official languages, there is no direct translation of the word prohibition.
It is these ingrained, insidious, seemingly irrelevant aspects of prohibition that fuel our fight. Language fuels the stigma and entrenches badly written laws and policies all around the world, not just in South Africa. When we started our social activism in 2011, not much had been done about the injustices inherent in over 100 years of cannabis prohibition. Apart from the leader of the fledgling Dagga Party of South Africa, Jeremy Acton, and Gareth Prince, a Rastafarian who challenged the South African government over his religious rights to use Dagga and practice as a lawyer at the same time. This was in 2001, and he very narrowly lost in our constitutional court. There were only really a handful of us who were actively promoting the benefits of the plant, and actually more importantly to us, campaigning against the harms of prohibition. The last 8 years have seen a massive increase in the awareness about the issues of and the support for legalization. Thanks to social media, we have learned so much and been able to help thousands of South Africans who are incarcerated, victimized, and terrorized by cannabis prohibition. That is to say nothing about denying our people their right to medicine. This law does not discriminate in South Africa. It's very important because it does discriminate in other parts of the world. But in South Africa, the law that prohibits cannabis discriminates and ruins the lives of young and old, rich and poor, black and white, sick and healthy. It targets every single South African citizen who chooses to use this plant.
So, aware that we were only ordinary criminals, we applied to register for a non-profit company to kind of get some sort of a legitimacy and an umbrella from which to run this campaign. So we went to the South African Law Society and they gave us permission to start South Africa's first cannabis non-profit company. And they told us to go to a specific law firm in this shiny building in the city to set up what we called Fields of Green for All. So during the process of registering that non-profit company for an illegal plant, we were called into the office of this big shiny building, and all the lawyers came down from the 5th floor to the 3rd floor and said, "We're so interested in what you've done and how you got so far, we are going to take your case to the highest court in the land, and we're going to charge you very little for doing it." That was a big day out, because at that point, we just had no idea how we were going to achieve the mission. So it was 2012 at that point, and we've been with these guys for 7 years now, and we would never have done it without them. Those books there are actually our trial evidence. That's just the expert witnesses from our side. And there's no way we could have collated that amount of information in the time given. And anyway, look how young they are. It's like the future arrived, and these guys are from the 21st century, and they are on the top of their games.
During the long months of waiting between court dates, we became convinced that we wouldn't even need to appear on the stand and be subjected to a no doubt grueling cross-examination by the state. What could we, Julian and Myrtle, possibly add to the evidence? We became more and more cognizant of the fact that when it came to evidence in our planned trial, we couldn't actually technically give any because we weren't experts in anything pertinent to the court. We were just plain old Jules and Myrtle, the stoners. We were confronted with all sorts of issues around constitutional law, sociology, criminology, health, law enforcement. We didn't really feel qualified. But it felt wrong to ignore the evidence of the two people with a combined 75 years of cannabis use. Surely we could offer something to the court, but at that level of law and arguing it according to all of these technicalities, our life experience was only considered anecdotal. It wasn't considered relevant at all. The only thing that we were experts in was ourselves, our bodies, our minds, and of course nobody knows that better than us. We don't have to elaborate on the notion of sovereignty to this audience. Everybody knows about that here. Of course we should have the right to alter the way that we feel, and more importantly, the way that we think. And under the influence of cannabis or any other social intoxicant, or a relaxant, or an entheogen. It was just the articulating of those rights that was the stumbling block.
So we put this challenge together, and the challenge is based on three very important things. It's based on mine and her human right to sit on the couch and smoke weed in the privacy of our home. Same with you. It's a sovereignty issue. My body, my choice. Back off. And importantly, it's a cognitive liberty issue. Now, I remember in 2016 watching somebody called William Montgomery at this exact festival, and he stood on a stage and he started ventilating about cognitive liberty, and he used the analogy of our governments having locked us out of our own minds. And at that point, I knew exactly how I was going to produce some evidence for the High Court in Pretoria. That's exactly the argument that I was going to use. And during the same presentation, he mentioned the name Charlotte Walsh, who many of you may well know here. So her experience around articulating sovereignty in the law was invaluable to us because she had all these research documents. So we downloaded the documents, we called her, and she sent us more. So all of a sudden, we had all the information we needed, and we sold the information to our legal team just months before the start of what we billed the trial of the plant. Finally, we were acknowledged as experts, and we got on the list to give evidence in court. The definitive argument for the cannabis plant set off in the Pretoria High Court in August 2017, and it's one of the longest court proceedings in South African trial memory. In another precedent, we live streamed the proceedings to the world so everybody could see both sides of the cannabis story and hopefully make their own minds up.
But anyone in the NGO sector will tell you that fundraising is always the biggest challenge. Our desperate bid to raise money to do what we set out to do is such a good example of how this plant brings people together. The sheer cost of this challenge has got to be the reason nobody has tried it before from this angle anywhere in the world. A full trial in a high court with expert witnesses covering every single angle of the cannabis Dagga debate and the unique angle of human rights, sovereignty, cognitive liberty is really, really expensive. The added challenge was that we're on the southern tip of Africa. And the esteemed minds we were after, our main star witnesses in particular, were all in Europe and North America. We were going to have to dig deep to pull this off, especially seeing as our South African rand is worth virtually nothing. We decided to crowdfund our experts' expenses because none of these esteemed minds flew economy anymore. In 2015, we embarked on what was to become a really forgettable 6 weeks of our campaign. Never in our lives had we asked for money like this before, and it will be remembered as a very challenging time selling ourselves and our ideas to South Africa and the world. We look back at periods like this and we wonder what we would have done without the ability to tap into the wisdom and experiences that are available to us through South Africa's psychedelic community. Little did we know that we would have to learn how to say the word neuropsychopharmacologist, let alone actually try and fund an airfare for one. So those were our challenges around fundraising, but it really brought people together.
We raised $26,000 US in 42 days. And one of the things that struck us at the end of the exercise was, out of all the donations, just over 400 donations, none of them came from a stranger. Every single donation came from somebody we knew through our already existing network. So thankfully we had this network, and thankfully at the end of this 42 days we had the money to fund our experts. In 2016 we hit a glitch. The trial got so big and we had so many experts and there were so many permutations, the court date we were given wasn't long enough. So we had to literally wait another year. As is often with the case, the glitch turned into a blessing. It simply gave us more time to polish the argument and time to put the courts on the back burner, because we've been doing law for 6 years now. And then we could concentrate a bit on drug policy. And as we said, we got our day in court in August 2017.
Our local and international experts would give evidence around what we termed the 4 platforms. Number 1 was responsible adult use. That's us. We never use the word recreational because it sounds flippant. Number 2, industrial cannabis. Very, very important. The hemp side of things. Number 3, the health uses of cannabis. Number 4, traditional, cultural, and religious use. This is very important to remember because there are 350,000 registered traditional healers in South Africa. These traditional healers want cannabis back in their pharmacopoeia. They've been using it for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And you try telling these Rastafarian elders that cannabis isn't an entheogen. We spent our first 3 court days arguing over the right to live stream the trial. Then next, the state and their co-plaintiffs, Christian fundamentalists, right-wingers, doctors for life, made every effort to grind the proceedings to a halt. Firstly, they tried to dismiss all of our evidence. That didn't work. So they magically produced voluminous amounts of last-minute evidence and lengthy questioning and endless cross-examination and every single delay tactic that they could find. A renter crowd even appeared outside the court, and the t-shirts and lunches for this crowd were paid for by the South African Department of Social Development. So it was a tough time. We spent 19 days in court. We still haven't made it to the bench, Julian and myself, to give our evidence. The trial was adjourned after these 19 days, with most of the witnesses still waiting in the corridors, waiting to testify. Professor David Nutt, who many of you may know and who is very, very much loved by us, he was our star witness and the aforementioned neuropsychopharmacologist. He had just enough time to obliterate the state's evidence with his acclaimed research into the relative harms of drugs before we ran out of time.
And then the unexpected happened. Just before we went into court in the north of South Africa, in Pretoria, in Cape Town, the leader of the Dagga party, Jeremy, and the Rastafarian we showed you earlier, Gareth Prince, they went into the Cape Town High Court on what we call application. So whereas we were going on trial and we were putting expert witnesses for cross-examination, They went on application, which means no cross-examination, no experts, but just piles and piles of information for the court to appraise. So, in March 2017, their presiding judge, the bench of 3, deemed the use of cannabis in the privacy of your own home, the laws are unconstitutional. It is your right to use cannabis, to trade in it, to grow it, and use it in the privacy of your own home. That's what these guys got. This funny, what we call the privacy law. Well, the headlines went crazy. Because nobody really, this was completely out of the blue. Nobody expected this as a result, this funny privacy law. And as you can see, the good and the bad side came out of all of the newspapers. The state immediately appealed the ruling. They weren't happy with it at all. They want to go back to the court. But we saw that as nothing but good news to our challenge, because it appeared that the walls of South African Dagga prohibition were just actually crumbling. That appeal was heard in the highest court in South Africa, the Constitutional Court, in November 2017, on the day of my 58th birthday. And there is a bench of 10 judges in green. And this courtroom has been built from the very same bricks that the apartheid jails were made out of. They destroyed the jails, cleaned the bricks, and made this place for all to see. And it was by far one of the most precious days of our lives, actually. So right now, we wait for that court to make the decision of whether we need to go back to the Pretoria High Court to finish our evidence, or whether they have enough evidence to actually legalize this already.
Our NGO Fields of Green for All is now the backbone of our challenge and our legitimacy. No longer are we two middle-aged, middle-class, Dagga Couple, stoners, whatever you want to call us, and despite R1,000 bail still hanging over our heads, we now have security clearance at the United Nations, and we've taken our legal challenge all over the world in order that we can learn from the global drug policy debate and cannabis culture communities. Why were we going to such elaborate and costly lengths to prove our point in a court of law for the last 8 years? The fact that cannabis is illegal, isn't that a reason not to use it? But why was it illegal in the first place? What is it about changing our consciousness with a plant that makes it so offensive for the lawmakers? Being invited to speak at Beyond Psychedelics here today has created another crossroads in our campaign. And preparing for today, we've had to re-look at loads of these questions that feature in our daily lives. The history of apartheid in South Africa is really well known, and now more than ever, we have a responsibility to make sure that cannabis legalization is not another version of prohibition, as we're seeing in Canada, or that it results in a new form of drug apartheid. Oh, cannabis is okay, but what you choose to take is not okay. We don't need any more apartheid in this world. No matter how much we fight in the courts and with the policymakers, the issue of intoxication remains at the root of all stigma. The legal regulation of cannabis in South Africa is inevitable. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. But we will carry the burden of this stigma with us as the new policies are drafted. You just want to get high, or getting high is self-indulgent, or getting high is dangerous. This will be the foremost in the minds of those in power, and it's something that we really, really have to look out for.
We're a major cannabis-producing country. The World Health Organization says we're the 3rd biggest producer in the world, and Myrtle and I have been to valleys where we would agree. It goes as far as the eye can see in every direction. It's one of the most beautiful sights in the whole universe. The plant is entrenched in South African medicine and social culture. And the stigma that Myrtle talks about can only be addressed when everybody, the policymakers, realize that our use does not equal abuse, because that's what they actually think. Our defense is simple. Getting high happens in our own minds in a private way that only we can feel. And we believe cannabis is a teacher plant, and we can credit it for so much that's happened in our lives. Slowing us down when things get hectic, providing much needed focus in a mad world, and of course keeping us healthy. That shift in consciousness that we all love and appreciate is still almost impossible to measure, difficult to quantify, and altogether curious to describe. There's nothing in this plant that makes us do it. We do this to ourselves. You know, the gateway theory would have us believe that there's something lurking in the plant that hooks us in and makes us uncontrollable. But rather, we believe the particular effects of cannabis are primarily a function of a particular person using a particular strain in a particular way, under particular conditions, at a particular time.
For us, Jules and Myrtle, we know that our use of psychedelics is one of the things that attracted us to each other in the first place. We also know that relationship where one partner doesn't use psychedelics or drugs, or more importantly, disapproves of the other partner's use, the relationship seldom works. That understanding of the value and enjoyment of changing one's consciousness is a fundamental thing that brings people together. And look at this amazing gathering here today and for the next few days. Our first foray into international drug policy was in a 13th century castle in a freezing Netherlands in January. There we signed a document called the Heemskerk Declaration, reminding the United Nations about the rights of South African indigenous Dagga farmers and other world producers of prohibited plants. Remember, Dagga cannabis, it put food on the table. There are an estimated 900,000 small-scale rural Dagga farmers in South Africa. We followed this document, the Heemskerk Declaration, to the United Nations General Assembly's special session on drugs in 2016 in New York. It was surreal. All the people that we'd been following on Twitter were milling around the foyer of the United Nations. It really felt like that we'd become part of something huge. After feeling so isolated and so far south at the bottom of a vast, underreported continent, we were now introducing ourselves at the highest level. It's very easy for the rest of the world to ignore Africa. We don't see too many delegates from Africa here today, and it kind of pains us in a way that Africa's just never mentioned. But we were making some progress. We butted in on the conversation at Harm Reduction International in Montreal, Canada, and represented Fields of Green for All at the UN in Vienna for C&D 61 in March this year. This month, we managed to make video representations to the World Health Organization in Geneva while they were busy reviewing cannabis. We've continued in this vein, from butting in on Twitter threads to winging it, writing abstracts for a speaking slot at another drug policy conference or special interest group. We've trusted in the process and taken guidance from the altered states we found ourselves in from time to time.
You could say that today we're coming out of the psychedelic closet. Oh. Always proud cannabis users in court. Always proud cannabis users. In court, we were accused of being poly-druggists. That was the term that was used to try and ruin our reputations. As far as we're concerned, cannabis will be the gateway to more evidence-based drug policy in the future. And it also needs to be the gateway to open and honest discussions about why we like to get high. It's one thing knowing and wanting the law to change, but what do you want that law to look like? So together with a favorable court judgment, we hope and pray that every South African cannabis enthusiast is given a voice in future cannabis policy. As an antidote to the dryness of policy matters, we're huge fans of fundraising downtown parties, gatherings of thousands in the streets of Johannesburg to celebrate their relationship with the plant, blaze it up and stick it to the man for the day. So our plan going forward is fueled by the energy of all of these people from this Dagga community, from our local volunteers that we see every day, to the activist enthusiasts the world over that we're meeting today in Prague. Nobody is free until everybody is free. But we are going to work through this together, and we are going to put our collective psychedelic heads together, and we're going to inspire each other along the way, because at the end of the day, we all like to get high some way or another. My name is Julian Stubbs.
My name is Myrtle Clark, and we're the Dagga Couple. This is our story so far, and thank you for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of the speakers. We've kind of run over time, so if people do have questions, then do put your hands up. Otherwise, the speakers are here to come and have a chat with. Yeah.
Hi, Ash from Australia. I'm one of the founders of Students for Sensible Drug Policy Australia, and I also co-host a community radio show. We kind of followed along loosely some of the stuff happening in South Africa, but wasn't really aware of your stories. Sharing that with us. I was actually chatting with a lawyer in Warsaw last week.
We need another jingle. We need like intimate. It's coming. It's
The
coming.
jingle,
Jingles
yeah.
are coming.
Sibunye, dude.
We said all the most interesting things while you guys couldn't hear us.
Yep.
All the best, but without
All the
you.
funniest jokes came up.
Yeah, dude. We were the lemon in the lemon cream. No, guys. You've been listening to what you've been chatting about. So, giveaways. We're going to get our head around it. We just want to make sure we play by YouTube's TH and C's. But if you guys are up for one owner only stuff that we get that we can pass on to you, I think we're going to start making a real effort with that. Next episode, I promise. I'll take care of that.
Ooh,
but while we were there, something literally happened pretty much live on Facebook right now. We haven't got any inserts for it. It's like breaking news. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, it's just like someone that's put a story on. It's like they've got good feedback.
Oh wow.
So basically, I'll just give you the blurb. No names will be mentioned. There was a child that is autistic, and they made an oil, a 1-to-1 oil from cold pressed THCA and a CBD isolate mixed into MCT oil. The person I think is currently on 1 drop 3 times a day, bumping up the dose to see what happens. Then the reply basically is saying that this little girl had an episode yesterday morning early. She had an episode, gave her oil, and not long after she fell asleep, no screaming during the day. She was also calm and went to sleep that night earlier than other nights. She still hits and bumps her head in the wall, but not so much. So
this happened right here in South Africa?
Yes, this is a local
they
story.
Made a cold press oil.
I mean, they've made an oil 1-to-1, whatever it is. The fact is that they've made an oil
at
home, essentially.
At home.
Give it to someone and it worked. It's not like it had to be made in a lab or in a special environment for it to be
effective.
Because safe is not a good word to say, because if it was not made safe practices, it's not safe.
Yeah, true.
Because let's face it, it's like if you're making medicine with the weed context. I'm going to shoot this cat here. Cat, I'm going to get the pillow and go down to the creek with you.
Get out of the muffins.
Will someone love him? I think he's looking for attention. He's that kid. Capture him, Shoal. Pokemon. There we go.
Sound out of
Compulsory
sync.
love.
Good kitty.
Yes. This is going to go viral when he strikes Shoal. I set him free.
Harold, mind the bombs.
But like, it's hard to make bad medicine. You really need to be really negligent to fuck it up when it comes to making medicine from weed, I think. Or
come on. There was a guy that was making benzene extraction with it. It wasn't quite extracted properly. Who knows what he was doing? Who knows what a lot of these guys are doing? So it comes back to it. The whole testing thing comes back to it again. You know, it would help if this story came with a test with the oil that they gave to the kid. It would really have helped.
Yes.
But what's happening there? We're hearing noise, dog.
Sorry. Echo.
Sorry.
Whoa.
But yeah, so I just think it's a good story. But
it's a brilliant story, and you're right. We do need to get more people aware that we need to be asking for.
That's one that filtered through
like
to
this.
us. I'm sure this happens every
yes,
day.
that's the thing. It happens a lot. It happens a lot.
Well, I think that's
Just
what I've
big
been
ups to
hearing
them.
about the most lately. It's been like the biggest surprise to me is that everybody I know, from like aunties to goggles, growing weed in their backyard, and they're all trying to make oil and medicine.
Trying to make shadow.
A certain group of people that need to really wake up and read more and just relax their anal sphincters.
But I can see it one day. You're going to walk there. You're going to be there. So Builder's Warehouse. And next thing you know, there's going to be a Keith Kirsten range of weed accessories. Can you see it, dude?
Bricks. Yes.
Hey,
yes.
Just the right things for the mites. Just the right things for the flowering.
Perfect
no more
pH
making
balance
do.
soil.
Yeah,
Prepackaged.
So they're asking for a post-game analysis of what happened in that talk. We couldn't really hear what was...
We could hear a bit, but I'm going to be real with you. So we've heard the chat a lot.
Yeah.
I think to get more of a feel, check out Fields of Green, the website. It's got all that there. But it was a good talk. I feel like it was a good talk. I think, you know, to be representing, you know, this is like the World Cup of shit.
They are in the that's it, where the Cannabis Liberation Day, that's it.
They really are.
Big ups to Jules and Myrtle.
Working hard and putting themselves out there and putting us on the map.
Yeah, and I think we're also a little bit like, we're the choir. We know the tune. So what do you guys think? Do you think they represented? Hey?
I do.
They did, they did. They're all saying, well done, much love.
I know
preach.
they put a lot of effort into that talk.
They put?
A lot of effort into it.
I think it's a culmination of years of build-up, you know, so their content is always...
The more they get out there, the more countries they get heard in, the more that their word is going to be stronger in bolder, and that's it.
Exactly, sharing their own story. And
they don't have to think about the lies if they were telling any, but there's none. So.
Exactly.
But let's get on to our strange story of the week.
Yes.
I'm gonna read the whole article because it's not that long. So this was in the Times in Swaziland. The headline is New Breed of Feminized Dagga Taking Over eSwatini, which is in Swaziland. Tunes Pigs Peak, eMswati no longer have to go to the mountains to cultivate Dagga, as there is a new kind of the illicit herb which can now be grown inside the comfort of their own homes. The latest breed of Dagga is known as skunk, and is said to be easier to grow even for people living in urban areas. Dagga is currently illegal in the country, though there are efforts being made to legalize it for medicinal purposes. The Dagga, whose seeds are smuggled from Holland, can be grown indoors or in areas such as greenhouses. The smuggled skunk seeds are feminized, meaning that they produce only female plants. No seeds are produced since the plants are female, and this ensures that the maximum yield of Dagga is produced. The Dagga is grown to a height of about 200 centimeters, and to meter... This is weird. And to meter when mature.
To a meter.
No, they've missed a bit. There's a word or two missing. The grammar's not great. But I think that's what they're saying. But isn't 200 centimeters 2 meters?
Yes.
So, and they say, and then they go on to say, unlike local stuff, which is also grows up to 2 meters.
It's twice the length of this table.
No, but they've said it's the same height. But they've tried to say, so I don't know. I don't know.
But land strains are going
same but different.
Yeah.
But much bigger than 2 meters.
But what strikes me about the story, it's like some motherfucker in Swaziland just fired up his Windows 95 for the first time and went and landed on some article from the UK Telegraph from like 20 years ago. Because this is that UK syndrome. It's not weed, it's skunk.
The word is so catchy and it's so overused that you get a lot of people that just call any weed is called skunk. It's just such a catchy word. It's overused and overrated.
Skunk, bro.
Yeah. Skunk is the term for the like chronic weed. You know, that strong weed.
But who's still calling their weed skunk? Because that's
so
also like
old,
20
yeah.
years
It's
ago.
so 20
Who
years
sells
ago.
skunk anymore?
England.
I haven't smoked skunk in like 6 years.
My mate comes back from England, he always talks about skunk.
Is it?
That's it, they still sell skunk.
Is it not also like teenagers, let's be honest, who are just trying to like exaggerate everything?
Well, I recently smoked some skunk #1 and it was actually really superb.
And how long ago since before that though? Because it never comes up on my radar, skunk.
No.
Never.
Well, cheese is skunk.
You oaks at home?
Here, it's cheese, you know what I'm saying?
You
Cheese is skunk.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is, a phenotype of skunk.
Yeah.
That's where it came from.
Okay.
But what we're talking about here, skunk #1, super skunk, because there's also different
skunk
skunks.
#1 or... I think, it was really old school skunk #1, but one of the phenos that they found, it was just one of those particular phenotype that smelled that bad, and they just called it cheese, and they got it.
This stuff was really smelly.
Yeah.
I've never seen weed so smelly, so it deserves its
Can we
name.
just hear that again? I
was
have
for
never
real.
seen weed so smelly. I think
Never
that made the
smelled
point.
weed
You can
so
see the
loud in
smell.
my life.
Smell-o-vision.
It was the loudest weed I've ever smelled.
That's it.
Loud.
It was loud.
Oh, Shaw with the mic drop. Loud, eh? Yes, that's current, dude. Because it's all about the loud now. But it also, it's like, oh, you know, I really love the history, though, of, like, skunk and the urban legends that go with weed, because there's such a strong culture of that. And now we've demystified everything. There's no more thrill anymore. You just Google a thing and you know the answer. But do you guys have any favorite marijuana myths?
Catnip.
Marijuana.
Yeah, we're gonna dab this cash.
Nice, posing for the camera and everything.
God, dude.
Stuff you, I want to be on camera.
Feral cat, though. But like I said, do you have any favorite marijuana myths?
Like, what's yours?
Yeah, give us an example.
I guess that my favorite one growing up was that it was going to give you a limp dick. It never gave me a limp dick, dude.
No, like if you smoke the seeds, you'll be impotent.
Yes.
It's the opposite.
That was all like, you know...
It was scare tactics.
Yeah, scare tactics that they gave you at
Scare
school. They'd come in with one of those like guidance counselors and preach to the kids in the assembly.
It's all a load of crap. It's a really good aphrodisiac.
There we go.
Smoke the pips and it'll make
Finish
you
and
blind
plant.
or whatever.
But there's also the great one. It wasn't so much just weed related as a lighty that say don't take sweeties or stickers from strangers, because it'd be those tattoos and they'd say there'd be LSD in it. And I was like, what motherfucker's wasting his good acid on kids? And where is this oak? I'll go knock on his door. I'll say,
if a stranger offers you drugs, say thank you, man. Drugs are expensive.
Yeah, the gateway theory.
Not good.
But you guys haven't hung on to any of those myths that they...
Sure.
No.
Are we so over it already?
Yeah.
Completely, but the more informed you are, you know.
Yeah, you find out it's also a lot of rubbish. And
You very quickly
you
very quickly learn about propaganda and how it's just a bit of brainwashing.
All you have to do is smoke some weed for yourself and find out that it's not really addictive. Like all these things people say about it is not true.
You're not going to go mad.
It's different for every person.
You're not going to jump out of buildings. You're not going to, you know, reefer madness is not real actually. It was pure propaganda.
It only makes you paranoid if you don't smoke it.
Enough.
Although, do you guys remember the classic from last year? Because it's almost the anniversary of that comment. That oak and that chick with weed makes you rape your mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the most striking.
That was crazy.
There's no nostalgia about that. That was just like...
That was a new one.
That was outside the court. Yeah.
Wow. That is radical, hey?
That's creative writing.
Wow.
But do you think maybe it's happened? I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
I cannot believe it. Never. Chocolate.
Yeah.
People like to blame the drugs, you know?
Yeah, I like to blame everything.
Blame the drugs, don't blame yourself.
So, Ash, help me out here. What's the word for a person who's into bees? Is it apiarist or is that something else? What's a bee person?
Correct. An apiarist.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Apiarist. And from what I understand, Ash knows a thing or two about all things gardening and like legit growing, but he also knows bees, which is a recent thing for me.
Bees buzz.
No.
Buzz.
It's like a part-time hobby really for me. But I've been playing around with bees and keeping bees for about 6-7 years now. Done a bee course and I know a thing or two about bees.
Well, that's great because there's this thing that's been going around for about a year now. So it's not really fresh, but it came up locally again. And it's this video about this guy who makes honey, but the bees make the honey from cannabis plants.
So what, the bees pollinate the cannabis or what?
Pretty much, dude. Okay. Check out the video, see what you think. I'll give you guys a bit of a history.
Get too stoned to pollinate the...
So this oak says he's got 20 years experience with bees, and they show shots of bees on all the dank bud, bees. And he says that he believes bees process everything out, so it's a really... honey's pure, blah, blah, blah. I don't think he makes any claims of THC, but where things started kicking off online was that Gang Oaks was saying, but there is THC in it. And in my mind,
the question is, would there be THCA?
THCA, man.
No, I don't even think.
Not
Could it
THC.
even? I don't think you could even get. I don't think THC becomes part of the equation because there's no female in honey. It's only male. Help me out here, Oaks, because I'm
Honey's
dominating.
made from pollen.
Can there be honey that's got THC of any grade in it?
Cannabis pollen will make you stoned. That we know.
Well, let's look at it properly. Let's look at this.
Okay, check it out. From what I see, Sure, the bees are going to go for the pollen and the nectar, which, of course, the cannabis plant is going to produce. There's no pollen being produced on the female, but there's still, obviously, nectar. There's still stuff there. Now, the trichomes are sticky.
There's trichromes. Trichromes are not nectar.
Why would the bees be going for the weed plant?
I think what they're doing is they're trying to pollinate the female plants is what they do. So I think there must be males.
He said he's trained the bees to go to the plants. And how on earth would you do that? But maybe using pheromones, you could get the bees to go and rub all over those plants, because as soon as they rub in there, that THC is super sticky. Now, but that's going to get all over the bees, and that's going to get in the hive. And I reckon there will be some THC in the honey. Definitely.
I recently dabbed pollen.
Okay,
if pollen
check
can
it
make
out.
you stoned.
If they're making contact.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Just by handling weed, your hands get full of resin. Now, if those bees are walking all over that dank weed, there's going to be resin all over. Now, the bees are actually, bees are quite fascinating, in fact, that when they fly, the vibration of their wings actually creates a static charge, which, when they land on a flower, the pollen is attracted to them by a static electricity. So now, they've got this static charge. When they land on that bud, they're just going to be getting super sticky. Then they rub that all off, and they're going to be putting that in their honey. Bam! There's definitely going to be THC in there.
I don't know.
But I don't think they trained it. I don't think
the trichome's a big thing.
I think by offering the cannabis plants around, a lot of them around the bees that they happen to take. I don't think you can you train bees?
No, that's why I said using pheromones.
Yes, by pheromones you make them go somewhere or go onto something.
So if you dip some pheromones on those plants, the bees are going to go nuts all over those plants.
Like they do there.
Exactly.
And you don't see any plants like that normally. Ever.
Yeah. I never really see bees.
No flowers ever covered one bee, two flower, and then like it comes and goes.
Hang on. Whoa. The right flowers you will have.
Like that.
Bees haven't discovered it.
Yeah. Pride of Madeira is a perfect example. It's a great bee plant. If you want bee plants, okay, it's not a, it's one of those invasive species, blacklisted plants. It's the best bee plant you can get.
The mad scientist in me hears what you're saying. So you're saying because they're touching female plants, they're basically picking up hash, and it's going to become part of the honey as part of that process.
Just by default, yeah. They're not actually collecting it on purpose.
So in theory, if we could take it one step further, if we could train the bees that have now picked up the hash to offload the hash somewhere else, we would have full melt. And we would call it terpenes.
So Martin here says, okay.
I'm not sold.
Yeah, I also had a few hives and that.
It would at least be bringing along some of the terpene profile, wouldn't it?
Perhaps.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it would, of course it would. It would bring the flavour, just, yeah.
Definitely.
He says, sadly, cannabis plants do not produce enough food for bees, so they will naturally avoid them, so you would need to force the bees and use a pollen catcher, like we were saying.
Yeah.
There we go.
So it's bee slavery.
But your bees will starve if that's all they have, so...
Yes, you'll have to... that would be like a party trick, you know, you'd send your bees there, they'd go do that, but the rest of the time...
Honey is bee puke. They don't eat the oil.
Exactly. No, but that's what I said. They're not going to eat it.
Exactly. They're just going to hold it.
That's what I said. It's going to stick on their body. When they get back to the hive, they push that oil off, and it's going to just, by default, fall in.
Did you say bee puke?
They're not going to...
He said that.
Yes, that's what the bees
do.
But
they infuse the honey with cannabis extracts.
Yeah,
people are making
the... not vegan.
Then they'll feed off the honeysuckle and still...
No, they'd avoid the weed.
I think we must put this to a vote because we're coming into land. So let's vote on it.
Really?
Cannabis, fact or fiction? Dan, fact or fiction? Do you rate there's THC in that cannabis honey?
It's fiction.
Ash, THC in the honey, yay or nay?
THC in the honey?
Yeah, as a result of this situation.
What I saw on there...
Come on.
I think the story is far-fetched. But I think you could possibly get THC into the honey if you did that. You went through the effort. You probably could do it. Yeah. But I think it's far-fetched. It's a far-fetched story.
Joe?
Don't see why.
A lot of manipulation had to go into this.
I don't think it's worth it.
I'm not sure about the THC, but maybe some of the terpene profile. I don't know. Maybe some of the flavours of food, but not the effects.
So you think it's maybe smell?
These are seriously particular about what they bring into their hive.
I agree.
I don't know much about those.
From what I know, bees collect pollen on flowers, right? And a friend recently gave me a teaspoonful of cannabis pollen, which I dabbed. It wasn't easy to dab with, but I dabbed
Dabbed?
with it, and it made me stoned.
Let's do that. Let's do 5 minutes
Listen,
on
it
this.
made me stoned.
Cannabis pollen.
Let's,
Made me stoned.
From male plants.
From a
Yes.
male
So no,
plant.
I don't know if there was a male or I don't know how these things work.
can we?
I'm not
Let's do 5
Never.
minutes on this.
That's a myth. There's a cannabis myth right there.
It's not a. It's not
Yes.
a. It's not a myth.
It's not pollen. When we say pollen, it's
Dry
I've
sift.
got a
dry sift.
photo of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but that's not
I'll
pollen.
show you after.
It's dry sift, so
It's hash. It's high end
It's a
hash.
hash.
But it's
It's a
like
type of
this
hash and they
very
call it-
fluffy dry
It's called
powder.
pollen. Yeah.
That's it.
We call it pollen.
It's not sticky. It's more static.
Mm.
It's like baby powder in a way.
Is it like
So you don't think that's pollen?
powder that builds up, dude? So it's what happens in South Africa. We do have a couple of misnomers when it comes to terminology.
Mm.
So I've also had it where people say pollen. Typically, pollen only comes off the male
Well, he
plant,
said
which
it was
has no
pollen.
value.
So
No, he said it right because in South Africa we use pollen to refer to high grade hash,
Mm.
Okay.
to screen hash. So it's still hash. It's still of the female plant, but we call it pollen because it looks like pollen.
Mm.
But it ain't actually pollen.
No,
But I think
no,
we're the only
okay.
place that does that. That's very unique that you bring that
He
up.
said it would give me a headache. It gave me
No.
the opposite.
Yeah, no.
Nice.
We'll call our hash
Yeah.
Durban pollen.
Yeah.
So guys, thank you very much. We tried a different thing. I hope you guys like the talk, but really, please go check out Fields of Green, like, subscribe, comment, and promise we're gonna make an effort with a competition. Christmas in July, 7/10. Ne?
Ne.
Yes.
Ne?
Yeah.
Stay lit.